What do you think it will take to solve this case?
DNA, definitely. They haven't, I mean, there was no other evidence there. Whoever did it did a good job at taking everything with them. What they didn't take was DNA.
A crime that took more than 3 decades to solve. A teen murdered in her own bed while her family slept downstairs. The perpetrator only unmasked after 30 years. The shocking truth finally comes to light. 16-year-old Fawn Cox of Kansas City, Missouri was murdered and then became a victim of necrophilia. Her family was oblivious to the ordeal taking place upstairs. Initially, police found clues to a robbery gone wrong, but the brutality of the crime just didn't add up to a simple robbery. The truth would come out over 31 years later, and the truth would leave her family shocked. In today's video, we will discuss the agony Fawn Cox had to suffer at the hands of a loved one. How did they identify the criminal yet fail to catch him? Pour yourself a cup of coffee, but beware, the harrowing details of Fawn's case will leave you feeling more than just caffeine buzzed. Fawn Marie Cox was born in Kansas City in 1973 to John and Beverly Cox. The family resided at 4640 East 9th Street on Van Brunt Boulevard, a cozy neighborhood where everybody knew everybody. With 2 younger sisters, Amber and Felisa, Fawn grew up too fast. She was always looking out for her younger sisters, as elder siblings do. Fawn's younger sister, Amber, was born only a year and 10 days after her. Despite the small age difference, Fawn was protective of Amber and looked after her. Although Fawn was well liked by her friends and the community, her closest companion was Donna McGee, who lived across the street from her. They often hung out with Amanda Gardner, Donna's cousin. Fawn was a very social person, and she was an active member of the Sheffield Assembly of God Church. Monty Clark, a bus driver at the church, recalled the popular young girl as a kind, pleasant person. This same Monty Clark would spend 20 years fundraising alongside the church to find out what happened to Fawn. She was attractive and popular. She got a lot of attention from boys, particularly a young man at church who just couldn't keep his eyes off her. Fawn was a junior at Northeast High School and loved to go camping with her grandparents. Her sisters would accompany her roller skating, which was quite popular in the 70s and 80s. She was in a serious relationship, though her boyfriend's name has been redacted from documents. While the Cox family wasn't poor, they were hand-to-mouth in terms of finances. The area where they lived was plagued by a Northeast gang called the 9th Street Dogs. They were suspected of various crimes, especially burglaries and thefts. The Cox's home was small but comfortable. It was a 2-story house. The downstairs consisted of the den and the dining room, which was converted into John and Beverly's bedroom. Amber and Felisa shared a room upstairs, while Fawn had the room across the hall. Both floors had 1 bathroom each, but everyone used the bathroom upstairs in Fawn's room. They also had a basement, but they hardly used it. John Cox often parked his orange dumpster truck in the alleyway behind the house, right under Amber and Felisa's room. Once, when they were smaller, the family was locked outside their home. Amber, who was a tomboyish child, climbed up to Fawn's window with ease and got into the house. The girls hardly ever locked their windows and often kept them open to get the summer breeze. This served as a way to get into and out of the home in case of emergency. Fawn liked to help her parents. The 16-year-old had a job as a cashier at a Kansas City amusement park, Worlds of Fun, and was eager to chip in the house. She was a responsible young adult. Summers can be particularly crowded for Worlds of Fun, and Fawn was working long shifts to keep up with the bills. Amber was working as a babysitter as well. On July 25th, Fawn had a particularly long shift while Amber, 15 at the time, was babysitting for a family. Felisa and their mom, Beverly, picked up Fawn from work around 11 p.m. Absolutely exhausted, Fawn went straight to bed since she had work again in the morning. Since the house was getting a little run down, Fawn had a faulty lock. The only way she could lock the door was with a steak knife that she kept in her bedroom. Felisa slept on a couch in their parents' room because they had the AC unit in their room, and that night was extremely hot. Back in the 80s, air conditioners were quite loud, like a large fan with a lot of mechanical turning components. The AC unit in the Cox's bedroom was installed in the window above their bed, so it really drowned out any noise from the street or from their own home. That night, between 12 a.m. to 2 a.m., their poodle started barking and whimpering. Felisa had to get up and calm it down, telling the dog to be quiet. That was pretty much the only commotion that was heard that night. The following morning, the family was getting ready to go about their day. John Cox went to use the bathroom on the second story where his daughter was sleeping. This bathroom was connected to both Fawn's and her little sister's room, so when he went in, he could see Fawn through the open door. Fawn usually slept in a nightshirt and underwear. However, John noticed she didn't have any underwear on, so he hastily covered her and went about his day. At around 10 a.m., Fawn's alarm went off. It rang and rang, but she didn't wake up. That wasn't like her. She usually got up immediately. Beverly Cox asked Felisa to go check on her, but she suspected something was wrong. Felisa went to shake her sister's shoulder, calling out, "Hey, wake up!" Fawn had been strangled with a gown, her body stiff and blue. It was obvious she had been dead for some time. Beverly Cox immediately called 911 and an ambulance arrived. Beverly initially suspected her Fawn had killed herself. By the time Amber arrived, the place was full of law enforcement officials. An autopsy revealed that Fawn had been strangled, then sexually assaulted after her death. She was brutally sexually assaulted and sodomized. Evidence pointed to a burglary gone wrong. A barrel of blankets was shoved out of their closet, and police discovered a stereo and Nintendo thrown out on the lawn from a second-story window. It looked as if the culprit left in a hurry and left the items behind. It appeared as though the burglars had snuck in through Amber and Felisa's bedroom window, possibly climbing on the orange dumpster truck while John Cox slept and Beverly was picking up Fawn. This had to be around 11 p.m. at night. The girl's father was a heavy sleeper and slept through anything, so it was highly plausible that the perpetrator hid until Fawn was asleep. The steak knife had been used to threaten the teen, and it was possible that more than one person was involved as Fawn's bed had wheels. Someone had to hold it to stop it from rolling. In August, police announced they had arrested 3 teenagers. One was indicted by a grand jury on charges of first-degree murder. He spent 8 months in jail, but was released when his DNA and prints did not match the knife. The rest were asked to volunteer their DNA and prints, which obviously was not followed through, and charges were also dropped. The nature of the crime seemed too personal to be an afterthought. Whoever snuck in had taken Felisa's gown from the bedroom. The action seemed pre-planned. Police also noticed that the suspects had proper knowledge of the layout of the house and knew which room might be unoccupied, so it was likely someone they knew. Unfortunately, in 1989, DNA testing technology wasn't that advanced. Fawn's case grew colder and colder. The days turned to weeks, to months, and finally to years. Her parents constantly kept trying to get police to reopen her case to find some sort of connection. They just wanted closure. The entire family suspected the gang was involved, as Fawn was dating one of the members. The teen she was dating was so moved by her death, he went on to join the armed forces. Fawn's family tried raising money to get DNA testing as soon as it became available. They put up billboards to gather as much information as they could and try to rally volunteers to the cause. Everyone was involved because the victim was a minor, and given how popular she was, people were truly shocked. In the year 2000, the family raised about $3,000 in reward money in hopes of someone catching the criminal. DNA from fluids found on Fawn's body were uploaded to the combined DNA index, but there was no match.
We need to see this solved. And money is their excuse? I don't understand it.
29 years later, in 2018, with a new cold case team for the Kansas City Police Department, the Cox family pushed for Fawn's case. An advancement in genetic genealogy allowed many cold cases from the 70s and 80s to finally be put to rest, such as the Golden State Killer. The Kansas City Police Department issued a press release stating that Operation Legend arrived in the city during the summer of 2020, bringing federal resources and facilitating the adoption of advanced DNA technology. As a result, law enforcement officials were able to compare the DNA profile of an unidentified suspect with other national databases, construct a family tree, and limit the potential suspects to a small group. DNA information was uploaded to one particular record, and software matched up the DNA mugshots with the available material. The catch was, Fawn's murderer had to be in the records. This means they would have been charged with some kind of felony, or their DNA had to be on public record due to a police matter. When KCPD was unable to reopen Fawn's case, the FBI funded the cost of the DNA tests in the year 2020. Fluids found on Fawn's body would be tested after all these years. Fawn had been killed by none other than her own cousin, Donald Lee Cox Jr. According to Amber, Donald was a shady guy and had subjected the young girls to sexual abuse. They never spoke up about it because it was so long ago. Unfortunately, the family would never see him in court because there was a reason why his DNA was in the system. Donald Lee Cox Jr. had died of a drug overdose in the year 2006. His blood samples had been taken to report the cause of death during an autopsy. This was a devastating blow to think that someone so close, who knew all along, was a wolf amongst sheep all these years. At the time of Fawn's death, he would have been 21 years old, an adult who killed and raped a minor. It is arguable whether solving Fawn's death has brought the Cox family any closure, seeing as the killer escaped justice. Or did karma deal with him? Donald Cox Jr. had a very troubling past, and it is possible he was under the influence of drugs when he carried out the gruesome murder. Interestingly, in 1984, Fawn's 20-year-old neighbor Tracy Snow went missing from her home. Sound familiar? Was Donald Cox Jr. responsible for more deaths? The truth might shock you. Let us know down in the comments below.